Welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show, where weekly I interview some of the world's most inspiring people from business, philanthropy, and entertainment. I love collecting humans, and these are some of my favorites I found along the way. This podcast has been brought to us by Capita Financial Network.
Do you need help with the next steps of your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call or schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Lindsay Hadley Podcast Show. Today I have my new friend, Jeff McCullough, on our call. Excited to interview him and hear a little bit about his personal story, what's brought him an interest as a pastor into LDS culture, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He started a very popular YouTube channel and exposes through creative content the differences in doctrinal beliefs, dogma, paradigms, even cultural nuances of the LDS community compared to traditional Christianity. And it's really fun to have Jeff on. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on my show.
Hey, Lindsay. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So good. I recently moved back to Utah a few months ago, but I'm actually zooming in from the North Shore of Oahu, where I was living prior to this. So appreciate your grace and some of the connectivity or any of the issues we might have. But Jeff, so thrilled to hear your story. Like, why don't you share with our audience a little bit, like, give the background of who Jeff is, how you ended up here. I mean, you make beautiful movies and videos and clips and short pieces of content, but also you're incredibly articulate, very clearly like a scriptorian, a scholar. But I think the thing that I probably admire most about you, Jeff, and what really drew me to you in seeing your content was just the empathy and the respect and the agreeing to disagree candor that I think we're really missing in today's zeitgeist. Like, there's a lot of divisiveness, a lot of unwillingness to be curious and ask genuine questions. People feels like they're constantly asking questions just to trap people and prove that they're right. I mean, your heart just feels like it's got the right intentions, and I really appreciate it as a member of the church and somebody who has had beautiful experiences in my faith journey outside of the LDS church that led me to building bridges, as well as you in the non-denominational Christian world. I kind of view one of my great calls of my life is to help unify the body of Christ. And I think it's anybody who's following the Savior and Jesus and doing their part. And I've gained so much love and respect for those outside of my traditional faith. And it's been really, really cool to explore this. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be a part of the conversation, especially because we've had a couple of conversations already, and it just seems like there's a lot of alignment in kind of seeing through the obstructions that so often get in the way of people just seeing one another and connecting. Even well-intended paradigms and constructs like religion, which can just allow us to just put each other in boxes and to categorize one another. And when we do that, what that allows us to do is to just collectively dismiss entire groups of people. And I think many of us we're not desiring that. We're looking for connection. We're looking to be seen, to be understood. And I'm not, it's not lost on me that even in the evangelical world that we have a tendency to do that, being the religious majority in America. And I think the evangelical culture that is all about getting people to see their need for Jesus, sometimes certain tactics have been used, well-intended as they may have been. But, in the 20th century, a lot of the evangelical approach centered around having these very large gathering services, church services. Sometimes they were called crusades, as a matter of fact. And they would do things called altar calls, where they would say, listen, if you don't know where you're going to spend eternity, tonight's the night where you need to make the decision to follow Jesus. And as a result, putting a really strong emphasis on avoiding hell, there is this compulsion to say that Jesus loves you, and if you put your faith in him, then you can spend eternity in heaven. And when it becomes so much about almost a transactional invitation, so come down to the front and say a prayer, and if you do that, then you could be with Jesus forever, which I think much of that is true. But what's missed in that is, like, first of all, you've got like this batch collection. Like, at this crusade, we're going to get this number of people in, get them to say this prayer. And it's all about sort of making the decision, when the reality is, I just don't know how much we live life in that transactional space. If we're just going to be honest, we all have a story. We all have a journey. We have all been trying to tell a story with the lives that we live. And sometimes those stories are told in ways that are consistent with our expectations, and sometimes they're not. And sometimes when we find a way to tell our story that feels consistent and true to who we are as individuals, it might not match up with the expectations of the people around us, whether they be family members, whether they be church leaders. So I just felt really compelled as I started to, as an evangelical pastor, sort of have the Lord just helping me gain a little bit of self-awareness in how quickly we will either, accept people if they're willing to fall into our paradigm, or dismiss them if they're not. Just found this pocket of people, and there's a whole story as to how I found it. These exiles, as I refer to them as, these members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who in large part aren't seen, aren't listened to, aren't taken seriously often, and yet there's a genuine, passionate faith, culture, and heritage that is multi-generational, especially in Utah. All of it just seemed really fascinating to me, and I began to press into chronicling this journey of me fighting my own critical impulses with curiosity, as you were referring to. And so I started this YouTube channel where I'm just chronicling my journey as an evangelical pastor, fighting criticism with curiosity to learn more about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and to connect as people.
Jeff, that's so amazing that you just, like, you can feel the sincerity of your honoring of this group of people. And I'd love to hear a little bit, like, what brought you to that curiosity, and like maybe a little bit of your history in ministry, your history, like how did you gain this amazing skill set in content creation? Because that's a unique talent in itself, and maybe a little bit of the journey that got you here.
Yeah, that's sort of the funnest part about this whole thing for me. So my undergrad was in technically music theory and composition. So I was into music performance. I would, do full compositions of, symphonic pieces, and I wanted to score for film and television, and realized quickly, as much as I love doing it, I'm not going to find a job doing this. Like, this is going to be very difficult unless I want to be a high school band director in Nebraska. I don't know if this is the path I want to take. So I pivoted into the more production side of music composition, which was audio and video production. And in the midst of all that, I grew up as an evangelical Christian. Faith was very important to me. I went to a private Christian college. That's where I met my wife. Faith was central to us. So I graduated my undergrad with a desire to continue to pursue this career in audio and video, maybe music. I worked in radio for a while. I worked in TV, and then I got into marketing. And about 6 or 7 years into all of that, I had already been doing volunteer ministry work, leading the praise and worship team at the church, helping with student ministry, to the point where I was leading the student ministry at the church I was at. But just feeling that the corporate world, as much success as I was experiencing, wasn't doing it for me. It felt hollow. Driving toward the bottom line felt so temporal and unsatisfying. So I really felt the Lord calling us into full-time ministry, and I moved in that direction. We stepped out of the corporate world. I took a job at the church that we were attending, in more of a ministry administration role, even though I was helping with ministry leadership in worship and in student ministry, but then very quickly began to step more into the pastoral role, began ordination, went back to grad school, got a master's in biblical studies from Moody Theological Seminary in Chicago. And that was it. I was pastoring at a church just outside of St. Louis. And about 10 to 12 years into that, all of my buddies that I left behind in the video production world, they kept going. And they started seeing a lot of success. So they had a desire, because of the success, they were actually having a lot of success on YouTube. This is about 2017 or 18. I, in full-time ministry, started helping my video production buddies on the side with some video work, kind of, as we say, getting my chops back, and help them establish a video production company. And then 2 years later, something super interesting happened. A global pandemic took over the globe, and where all of these churches were shutting down and were freaking out because they had to figure out how to do church. I'm like, hey, we're set. Like, Pastor Jeff co-runs a video production company. We'll just do video church. Like, I got this. So as awful and tragic as the pandemic was, when it came to pastoring and doing video work, there was something very fulfilling about it. I was like, I'm using both of my degrees here. I'm using my undergrad in audio video production.
You're ready.
I'm ready for this. I'm using my graduate degree in biblical studies, and I'm, checking in on people throughout the week and sermon prepping. And then on Saturdays, I'm shooting the video and editing the video and releasing it on YouTube. And in the midst of all of that, it was in 2020, we took a trip out west to see some friends in Salt Lake City. I'd never been there before. They introduced me to the Latter-day Saint culture for the first time that I just was very much unaware of, living in St. Louis. And that was the rabbit hole that I started to fall down. I was initially uninterested in, any sort of interfaith connection. I was doing just fine in St. Louis, but I just felt the Lord prompting me to continue to look into it. And the more I looked into it, the more conversations I had, the more research I started to do, the more books I started to read. I found myself doing research where most people do their research in 2020, and that is on YouTube. And so I'm watching these YouTube videos, trying to find interactions between Latter-day Saints and evangelicals so I can learn more about how does this connection look. And it was just, I wasn't finding anything that was very satisfying to me. There was a lot of...
It was all antagonistic probably, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of apologetics. It was a lot of debates. It was a lot of street preaching and kind of hidden camera tactics, hiding cameras and talking, pastors approaching senior missionaries or even just regular missionaries outside of temples or general conference. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. I feel like we can do something different here. And really, here's what it came down to. If this is what a Latter-day Saints perception of a pastor is, seems pretty limited. I don't know how often a Latter-day Saint is just going to knock on a Baptist church door and say, can I meet with a pastor? So I'm like, I'll go to them. So I'll be a pastor on YouTube, exploring the church. I'll chronicle this journey. And this gives Latter-day Saints an opportunity to interact with an evangelical pastor and for an evangelical pastor to learn from their paradigm. And initially started as a side project, and it ended up blowing up and taking off. And just lots of Latter-day Saints have come to the table saying, we want to have this conversation too.
Well, I love it because even if, we actually were introduced by our mutual friend, Rob McMillan, who's like, I joke all the time that I'm a Messianic Mormon. This is my joke that I used to say, because I went through a faith journey that deconstructed a lot of the legalism and my religiosity. And there's a phrase in Mormon culture that says I believe the church is true. And they say, I know the church is true rather. And I often say, I don't even know what that means. I don't have faith in an institution or like a religion.
Right.
I have faith in a person that is perfect love, that is Jesus. And so my faith, I see that all of the LDS doctrine and cultural things, I see them as a modality towards bringing me closer to Jesus, but I don't see it as the end all be all from my faith journey. And so I make a joke that I'm a Messianic Mormon, is that in that a Messianic Jew, it's like, maybe it's a little unorthodox to believe, in a Messiah or whatever. So I have some unorthodox views about Jesus, about how his grace is sufficient, and things that maybe don't that might demarcate me out of traditional, true believing, like very orthodox LDS practice. But I have a temple recommend and I'm an active member and all these things. But it's like that nuance is super playful. And our friend Rob calls himself a pharisaical Mormon. He jokes, he says it's
At least he's honest
it's
about it.
Sanhedrin. Yeah, he says he's a Sanhedrin. But his point is
That's funny.
he's making a joke that like he's super fundamental in it and foundational and very orthopraxy and orthodoxy. And so he's demarcating. We play about that. But what's fun is somebody like you would really like speak to me. I would feel a lot of probably congruency and a lot of maybe like doctrines or paradigms or views, I'm guessing. And from having watched your content, I'm just delight in it. And yet he also took a lot of pleasure in what you're doing because at the end of the day, regardless of maybe the discrepancies of your personal beliefs or where you guys might land differently on a take about something historical, he feels the love and respect and the appreciation you have for his faith, and it makes him a fan of yours, which is really cool. And I think that shows a lot, right? Like if you can have, and I'd love to know like what your demographic breakdown is. Do you get a more open aperture LDS cohort? You get traditional, very like, orthopraxy and orthodoxy LDS. Do you also get, what is your kind of your makeup of evangelical cohort for your viewership? Do you have kind of a good sense of your audience breakdown?
I do. I would say that 90% of my audience are very fundamental Orthodox Latter-day Saints. 5% or maybe a little more might be those who are a little bit more progressive. And then the remaining 5% are probably not of a Latter-day Saint background. They're either evangelical or Catholic. But I think that the comment sections, the feedback I get, the connections that I'm making are it's very clear to me that your everyday Latter-day Saint that goes to sacrament meeting, that goes to elders quorum and relief society and does all the things, they're the ones that are really interested in this conversation.
Cool.
And I
that
do think
surprises me. That's higher than I would have thought. 90%.
It surprised me as well. Yeah. But you know what I think it might be? I think at least in this niche here, what we have, and the reason why this is why there's not more evangelicals watching. Outside of maybe the Intermountain Corridor or certain areas where there might be a higher Latter-day Saint concentration, I will tell you, as someone who grew up going to church 3 times a week as a devoted, passionate evangelical, learning a lot about the faith, church history, all that other stuff. I, even in my late 30s, didn't know really what a Latter-day Saint was and what they believed. Had heard a couple of the tropes that had been fed to me, some of the actually less accurate characterizings of Latter-day Saints. But I really could not tell you the difference between a Latter-day Saint and a Jehovah's Witness. So I think there's a lot outside of a more Latter-day Saint rich area. It's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. And it's sort of just left in that category of a like fringe Christian group, or some might even get a little bit harsher when it comes to a more dismissive posture toward Latter-day Saints. But Latter-day Saints, on the other hand, Latter-day Saints are hungry, willing, and ready for someone to have a conversation with them for a lot of different reasons. One, historically, there just hasn't been a ton of opportunity for that in the broader Christian world. And 2, I honestly think it's because, and I don't think I've said this before yet, but this is a newer insight I feel like I'm gaining, and it came from me doing a tour of the MTC, the Missionary Training Center in Provo. The culture of missionary work that is built on this passionate desire to make sacrifices, to step away from everything that at a time in life where most 18 and 19-year-olds are very much focusing on themselves, my boyfriend or my girlfriend, or what am I going to major in, or whatever, or I'm going to take my gap year before I do this, or whatever. Latter-day Saints are like, no, I'm going to put it all aside, and for 2 years, I'm going to serve the church, and I'm going to knock on doors. And during those 2 years, it's the desire to do right by that calling and to accurately represent the Latter-day Saint plan of salvation. And the hope is that, like, I'm going to be baptizing some people. I'm going to be really helping other people see the hope that is found in the plan of salvation. So there's something almost poetic. It was halfway intentional, but it worked so well. The whole reason I call the channel Hello Saints, the reason I did that is because of the Book of Mormon musical number called Hello. And it's all these missionaries saying hello and introducing themselves, and doors getting slammed in their face. So I'm like, I'm not going to be that person. I'm going to say hello to you, and we're going to have a conversation. And I think Latter-day Saints are like, thank you. Like, this is what, ever since I was 18 years old, I just want someone to, like, just leave the door open a little bit longer and let's have a conversation. And I've found it to be some really beautiful dialogue.
Fascinating, Jeff. I think it's cool because I can honestly say through my deconstruction of my faith a while back, and like, again, found myself still active and with like a really beautiful healing around it all. Like, I feel like I can hold all of it in the totality that it is. And I have had so much healing and so much joy now in my faith practice and stuff. But for a time when it was really painful and I felt a little bit allergic, I found true healing in the community of the non-denominational Christian world, because they were so fluent in what I would call grace, this idea that, like, we're all sinners, we're not enough. The meritocracy or the legalism or the works-based aspect of LDS doctrine has always had a tension with the evangelical world, right? There's like a tension there in that
It's a good way to put it.
And I found that it was very powerful for me from a place of, like, because I'm such an evangelist at heart, meaning, like, I just promote anything I love. I don't, whether it's Capita, the company that sponsors my podcast, or a movie I love, or my favorite chocolate. Like, I just am a natural salesperson and promoter, like, to the people and things. If I love something, I want to share with the world. I'm very passionate and infectious about sharing things. And so, for me, for the first time in my life, I was in this place of being quiet and listening. I was in a place of hurting and unknowing. Everything had been, unraveled. I think that was by design. It was like a perfect celestial curriculum that God designed for me. He's such a good father that way. But, like, everything got deconstructed. I didn't know it up or down. I was like, I didn't, even know if he was real. I was like in this deep, painful abyss of a crucible of doubt, so to speak. And as I engaged with my Christian friends in that community, and I found ones that were really, really pure disciples of Jesus. Like, I mean, they never once tried to make me leave Mormonism or hate Mormonism, or they never tried to get into the weeds of, like, how this is wrong or this is right. They just loved me really well. And they shared their posture towards God, which was really that they woke up every morning and their life was a thank you note. They weren't trying to earn God's affection or earn heaven or climb some ladder, or there was no meritocracy. They weren't trying to be enough for anyone or anything, and certainly not their God. Like, their life was a thank you note. And this reckless love of God infused in them a gratitude that then led them to live in obedience, led them to live in a way that was in relationship with God, but it didn't have the that thumb on top of them, or like an a-hole boss trying to, like, keep them down. The energy that I think I had been struggling with, I'd really felt like I wasn't enough. And I'd had some experiences in my life that were really clear indicators that I wasn't. I had a business partner fallout that had totally, been dishonest and mismanaged money and embezzled funds. And I had, like, family members die and I couldn't help them. And they died of cancer and of renal failure and heart attack. And I had family relationships fall out, people that weren't willing to, like, work through rupture with me for repair. Like, I just had a lot of evidence that I wasn't enough in my life at that time. And so it was like a death by 1,000 cuts. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really am not enough. And so getting on a treadmill that the way I had viewed Mormonism at that time, like, I couldn't do it. Like, I was drowning at sea, so to speak. I couldn't tread water anymore. And there was something about the abundance of grace that my evangelical and Christian friends infused me with, that was the antidote to all my sufferings. I just listened and I learned, like you. I was like, hello, I need whatever you got. I'm not here to teach.
Sure.
I'm not here to convert. I'm not here to share what I'm talking about. I want to learn. And I was a sponge. And there's something, I mean, it took being really humbled for me to be in that, like that place of listening and learning. I wish it wasn't true about me, but it took that kind of humility. But it's beautiful that somebody like you got there just out of the goodness of your heart. Like, what was there something that made you think, hey, this is the way to be, other than just seeing it's not working? Was it a strategy as like, hey, this is the way I can reach these Mormons to help convert them? I mean, like, genuinely, with candor, was it just like, I really just want to know, I want to love the way the Savior did. I that's my sense of you, but like, I definitely, primed that question unfairly.
Yeah.
But the point is, was it a bit of all of that too, which is okay?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many factors. It's hard for me to pinpoint it being one thing, because I felt like it was almost something that I felt like the Lord was just kind of orchestrating and preparing us for. But the best way that I can maybe point to some contributing factors as to how it all came together. The reality is, we all have, especially if you grew up in a specific religious paradigm, we all go through a season of disenchantment. It happens. It happens to all of us. And for those it doesn't happen to, those are scary people to me, because there's something, this is the way my wife says it. She's a therapist. She says, you can't know God until you felt pain. Like, that's kind of a harsh way to put it, but there's something about being reduced and helpless and disoriented. That's when the Lord shows up, that you see, oh, like, this is the extent of my need and this is the extent of your love. Okay, I'm starting to see this now. And we went through a series of really, really painful things tied to our own religious paradigm. There was a denominational issue that we had with the church that I was pastoring with that led to a very difficult season, where there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of betrayal, and it kind of reinforced for me how even the best intentions of denominational Christianity can obstruct the mission of the gospel, the heart of the gospel, the heart of the Father. My wife went through a very, very painful situation when she was younger, which I won't get into too much, but she experienced some things she shouldn't have had to experience with somebody in spiritual leadership. And she was the victim of somebody. And in 2020, around the time that I was this is before Hell of Saints was even on the radar, some of that started to come to head, and she began to lead a victims group from this one predator in New York, where she grew up. She was on the front page of USA Today, and that reaches all the way back into her religious paradigm and religious heritage. And again, it's one, like, especially people who have been abused within a religious situation scenario. There's a very high statistic of those individuals walking not only away from religion, but walking away from God altogether. But she didn't. It's actually allowed her to find a greater depth with the Lord. So what does that amount to for us? I mean, from the pastoring side, things are going fine, but it just kind of highlights how religion can be an obstruction to seeing the heart of the Father. And if you really think about this in the way that Jesus had to conduct himself, I mean, he never told the Pharisees, leave your Judaism aside. You need to leave the Jewish community. He never said that. He said, you're obstructing the heart of the Father, and I'm here to help you see the heart of the Father. When he was with the woman at the well, he didn't say you need to stop being a Samaritan. He said, we believe differently, but we're all going to stand shoulder to shoulder, where the heart of the Father desires those who worship in spirit and in truth. When he's telling the parable of the prodigal son, he doesn't go back to the older brother and say, you're doing it all wrong. When the older brother is feeling jealous, he's saying, you're missing it. You're missing the heart of the Father. So
right.
What I was finding is in my own experience, when it comes to true pastoral ministry and leadership and shepherding and outreach, whatever you want to call it, where we have the opportunity to connect with individuals so that we can see the heart of the Father clearly, that has just become my motivation in all things, whether I'm preaching a sermon, whether I'm raising my kids, or whether I'm putting on a Hello Saints video. So, of course, there's a part of me that, and I say this all the time, there's obviously, most Latter-day Saints feel that I would be better off being baptized, right? Because I'm missing out. I'm right there. I'm on the edge of the celestial experience, right? If I would just take that next step. And obviously I don't align with that. I feel that I'm better off not being a Latter-day Saint. Okay. So here we are in our religious corners, right? So we have one of two options here. We can either slug it out until we prove each other wrong, or we continue to make connections so that we can see the heart of the Father at whatever pace you're comfortable with, at whatever new path that we have to forge, whatever expectations we have to defy. Let's do that. And that's really been the heart and the motivation behind Hello Saints from the beginning all the way till this day.
Jeff, I'm obsessed with you. This is so beautiful, and everything you're saying. This is so good. Because I'm sitting here thinking, one of my best friends since childhood is atheist, agnostic at best, but for sure probably leaning atheist. And she would say, I know that she would say in this conversation, well, that's edifying, right? Like, even because if at the end of the day you look at it as an anthropological view from an atheistic view, it's like, no, we're all just making up these constructs to feel safe in this world, and we're coming up with these, made up belief constructs that are faith that help us navigate pain and suffering and the human experience. And that's how religion gets born, and that's how faith in the other world that isn't real and it's all not true. Even if you do that, like what you just talked about has good fruit. Let's just talk about cause and effect. Like to sit down with other human beings when we have this planet together, we're in these different tribes or subsets. And if we can sit and break bread and commune and understand and learn to love, that helps humanity. That helps our lived experience in this life. That is tangible and real. No one can deny that, right? When we see ourselves and others, there is miraculous, beautiful things that come from that.
And that's why rather than us sidestepping religion, right? Like, no, that's like one of the deepest parts of all of us. So when we're sidestepping religion, we are sidestepping an opportunity for deep connection. Now, here's
Intimacy.
the thing, though.
Yeah.
Deep intimacy. That can be risky. Like, that can be a minefield because you're getting really close to, some nerves there. But that's all the more reason.
Paradigms where you might feel judged.
Of course, or rejected or shunned. Yeah. So, but that's why I also think that honesty is so important in these conversations. For me, this is not just about kumbaya. It's not about me softening even my strong biblical convictions or Latter-day Saints, compromising what they believe. It's about recognizing, my relationship with my wife is a perfect example. She is very different than me. Like, she's very different. I grew up as this people-pleasing, Bible Belt, church-going, almost Southern hospitality cursed boy. She grew up...
Decorum, Jeff.
That's right. Where she grew up in New York with a very, New York family, and what you see is what you get, and don't you even try to people-please me. I'll see right through it. So whenever our relationship, began, it starts in that sort of romantic, superficial. Wow, this is great. we're really attracted to each other. Like we really get each other, don't we? Right? Which is true. But when our relationship got really deep, and I think we all know this is kind of like relationship 101, is when we got in our first fight, right? And I realized, she's a lot different than me. It's 20 years down the road, and we're still wrestling with our differences, and we refuse to give up on each other. Like this is one of the things that I'll tell. And I mean, I love a good conversation with a sister missionary. I really do. But one of the things that they commonly will say to me is like, this is great. I love what you're doing because we're the same. And I'm usually like, we're similar, but we're not the same. Like, let's back it up a little bit. Let's not just want to be close because we're the same. Let's want to be close because we're different. Like, that's when you have the opportunity for true depth of connection and understanding and actually being known. So for me, that's one of the things that can be really confusing to people. If you look at the comment section on any one of my videos, I have just as many evangelicals saying, you call yourself a pastor, what do you think you're doing? If you love these Latter-day Saints, you would be telling them,
call them out.
And then I've got just as many people in the comment section being, you're you're a fraud. You're just being nice because you're trying to like pull people away from the church. And I think the reason I'm taking it from both sides is because, yes, I'm being kind and charitable and curious, but I'm also being honest. But I want Latter-day Saints to feel the safety to do the same. And I think they do, which is why so many of them are watching.
I love it, Jeff. So powerful. You're so right. The true test of intimacy is to be fully known and chosen. If you
Fully
can
known and chosen. I love that. Yes.
And that's like a big value we say in our family. I have 3 little boys, and we say that often, Hadleys are fully known and chosen. That's the hope. Is like, can you really expose yourself completely in vulnerability and still be picked? Like, the beautiful part is we see that in Jesus, right? Like, the first place he revealed his messianic calling, that he was actually the Son of God, the Messiah, not the Son of Man, is to a Samaritan. And he didn't ask her to leave Samaria. He didn't tell her to become more observant of the law of Moses. All he did was tell her to go back and to talk about the relationship with him and what she learned about him, right? And so, like I said, from an atheist perspective, what you're doing, I think, bears great fruit. Is just like smart, is a good humanist view. But you're right, it's not Pollyanna, it's not kumbaya. Like, on the flip side, in a world of where I believe in mysticism and this Jesus, this perfect embodiment of love, that's so his jam, right? He would just love us where we are, and he would show up and do the thing. And you don't have to mince words, but you don't have an agenda for somebody outside of just loving them well. And loving them well might dictate that you say, well, I think you're wrong about that, and let me share with you why. Or let me like walk you down that path of like why I think your logic is flawed, or where I think that might be, you might be running into, some cement walls there. I mean, love dictates hard conversations. Love dictates putting people in jail, divorce, or firing somebody. Love doesn't always look soft, right? And so this is really exciting to me, what you're saying. Sorry, there's some background noise here.
No, you're fine. I can barely hear
I think, well, that's great. That's good to know. So yeah, I think like at the end of the day, what you're doing is so profound, so revolutionary. How can people, I'm mindful of the time coming up here, but how can people be engaged? What is it you want to come out of this? Is there any okay, so once we connect and we have this intimacy, I think that's enough on its face from my personal view of like why we're here on this earth. Like, we're here to love and love well and love like the Savior does. And you are truly being a disciple. I love that. But outside of that, what do you hope? Do you hope that the conversations get brought up in other faiths? Do you hope people ask the same questions of your community? Like, what is the kind of like, your big picture dream or vision, or what is God showing you where this might go? Or what is your hope, any of your hopes or ideas, how we can be supportive?
I mean, I'm never short on ideas. So I love the idea around expanding the conversation. I've kicked around for a while. I grew up in a suburb of St. Louis, a small mining community of all Catholics, and I actually led in high school a Bible study as this evangelical kid to like 15 Catholics. It was amazing. But my mom grew up Catholic. My wife's whole family's Catholic. So I'd love the idea of maybe doing another channel like Hello Catholics. That would be really fun for me personally. Sounds like it's a good idea. That would be good. And I have thought about ways, how can we expand this conversation and demonstrate the ability that I think and capacity we all have and desire to patiently and curiously have these conversations. But that's really what it comes down to. I've just continued to stay in this lane of let's continue to till the soil here in this field with evangelicals and Latter-day Saints. And hopefully there's going to be somebody else, or maybe through the growth of whatever I'm doing, to take that, let's fight criticism with curiosity. I think that's really the secret sauce to it all, and to apply it to some of these other paradigms. Whether it's Hello Catholics, Hello Jews. I've got a buddy who said he would love to do something like this across racial lines, between African Americans and your, white Americans. Like, there's so many ways that this could be applied and useful to creating a safe space for these conversations. So that's the hope, is that down the road that can be where some of these conversations can expand into. Yeah.
That's so profound. Thank you so much, Jeff. And what can we do to support you besides like, share, follow, comment, help your algorithms? Do you collect for your ministry? Do you tell us a little bit about how we can support you?
So the Hello Saints is I set up a nonprofit for people that want to donate to just support this ongoing conversation, if just to be a part of this cause. It's called Hello Creative, and people can go to hellocreative.life. You can also go to hellosaints.life. It all goes to the same space. But that's where you can learn a little bit more about specifically where we're at right now, and what people can do if they would like to financially support, or just get a little bit more insight into the vision behind some of the principles and values that are leading and guiding us. And to keep an eye out on some new things that I've been trying that have been doing, I think, some positive, have had some positive outcomes. I recently did a summit where I brought in 20 plus speakers, half Latter-day Saint, half Evangelical. And we're talking like BYU professors and very well-known Christian apologists to join the conversation with me in the form of an online summit. And I'm going to continue to do more of those coming up. So yeah, just continuing to follow, obviously on YouTube, obviously on Instagram, and hellocreative.life, and keeping an eye out for some of these events that we're doing are all ways that people can kind of be a part of the journey. So.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for your beautiful heart, your amazing work, for your respect, for trying to fully know and choose me and my people. You're the coolest. I'm so grateful for you, and thank your wife. And thanks for coming on the show, Jeff. Happy 4th of July weekend.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you and to connect. I love meeting other people who, they're not getting the vision, but they share the vision. They already have the vision. So I'm excited to continue having conversations like this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
Do you need help with the next steps for your financial plan? Think Capita. Capita is a financial network built around you. They have a team of financial advisors, CPAs, estate attorneys, Medicare providers, and Social Security experts to help you accomplish your financial goals. Call to schedule a complimentary consultation at 801-566-5058 or visit their website at www.capitafinancialnetwork.com. You can also check out their financial education podcast, The Financial Call, available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and YouTube.